Hello everyone and welcome back to the Hybrid Friends. Today I'm back with the FAQ series after the amazing deployment series Bernhard and Karst did. I will link them below, so really watch that one, it's amazing. I would like to discuss with you the difference between Azure Stack HCI storage network switched and switchless configuration, and when you should use what, and a few of the up and downsides for both configurations. So as you can see on my screen, that's the most common and most known configuration. You're using the switched mode. That means your network connections, as you can see here, are directly connected to a switch. So all RDMA NICs are connected to your Tor switches, most commonly to two Tor switches for redundancy and also to improve performance. It's the most common pattern. The issue is your switches need to support RDMA and should have 25 gig when you have a cluster larger than 5 nodes, larger than 3 nodes, sorry. We normally recommend that configuration for larger clusters which are not planned to be downsized, or let's say larger clusters than 3 nodes, and if you want to scale further, as said here, but you need to follow up a bit more the complexity and also the requirements of your switch. I will link them in the description so that you can check your switches if they support the required features. The most common smaller deployment we're seeing is the switchless mode. Switchless mode means only your compute and management is connected to the Tor switches. The network interfaces for storage, for software, and sometimes also live migration are connected directly via daisy chain. So you have, for example, DAC cables, direct attached network cables, or you have GBX and then network cables in between. Connect one node from one NIC to another NIC on the other node, and then using those connections instead of a switch. The good thing here is you do not need to have a switch who supports data center bridging RDMA, and don't need to have the 25 gig ports or 10 gig switch, because the requirements for your compute, as long as you're not using software-defined networking, are much lower when it comes to those compute and management connections. So here the NICs already support those standards, so you can configure it on the direct wired NICs. It's like the cross connect between two PCs or two servers in the older days using cross connect cables. But there's a major downside for switchless configuration. As you can see here, switchless configurations, disadvantages and advantages page. I will link it again. It's maybe cheaper from the beginning, but it stops scaling. If you only have network cards with 2 interfaces, you can only connect to 2 other servers. So if you want to scale further, you would need to add more network interfaces RDMA to the server, which makes the whole deployment much more complex. The whole IP management, the whole subnet and VLAN management on the server also much more complex. So as the common scaling is, if you deploy to more than 3 nodes, you're moving forward to a switched configuration instead of a switchless one. With 2 nodes, 3 nodes, it's normally perfectly fine and perfectly manageable to deploy a switchless configuration. I will also link you some hardware guides from our vendor partners, like from Dell, with some deployment patterns. Also, I will link our deployment patterns for network ADC so that you can have some more information about how that should be cabled. But summarized on that one is that if you're having up to 3 nodes, don't have a switch which supports 25 gig RDMA and other things we would require for a storage network, you're perfectly fine going with switchless. If you want to go move further and have larger clusters, want to reduce cabling, want to reduce complexity on the networking level, then it's more common and the better deployment pattern is to use a switched configuration and then have also the required switches. And again, if you're going for a larger pattern, if you're going for a larger cluster, more than 3 nodes, which is the most common deployment, also 10 gig interfaces aren't enough, so you should go for 25 gig interfaces, or with even larger clusters, larger throughput, like 40 gig, 100 gig, depending on the systems we have. So if you have all flash arrays, network interfaces often become the bottleneck for the whole deployment. That's all for today. Explaining that pretty shortly. I said I will link you all the information below. If you have more questions, just ping me. And as you saw on the documentation, switchless configuration is also now supported as a deployment pattern in Network ADC and Windows Admin Center. So feel free to try it. Maybe use the Arc box and Azure Stack HCI Arc jump start to do some playing around with the configurations before you ordering hardware or playing with those. So it's nested, you really can play around with those patterns. That's all from me today. Subscribe to our channel, have a great day, and yep, leave us more questions.